What's up, everyone? How's it going today? I am Hunter King, Blind Eye himself, owner and proprietor of Blind Eye Media, a small internet media firm, and this is Blind Eye Live for Tuesday, April 13th. Yeah. Sorry if I'm a little stuffy and whatnot, dealing with some allergies and something's wrong with my throat, so, or at least at the moment. So I don't know what it is, like last Friday's show, I think it was, I wasn't feeling great. Today I'm not feeling great. Maybe it's all this weather change. I don't know. But I'll power through this one. So, on today's show, we're gonna talk about the Nuggets. Their title chances just took a huge blow last night for the NBA title. We have a actual kind of big name free agent signing that occurred yesterday or today, somewhere since the show yesterday. Yeah. And then we have the AFC North Draft Primer. So if you're a fan of Pittsburgh Steelers, Cleveland Browns, Cincinnati Bengals, Baltimore Ravens, today's the day to, well, get my opinion on what your needs are and when and who they should be targeting those needs. When they should target those needs and who they should target at those times. But yeah, so that's what we're going to get into today, and some other stuff, like I'll go down some headlines. Today, I did do a cursory check, and the headlines today seemed a lot less sad than yesterday's, or dark. Well, I say that, but the big, let's pop over this, and we'll jump into the news. Well, there we go. So, top page of the NBA section, ESPN. Jamal Murray's torn ACL means he is out for the season. And that's just the Nuggets, who, after the Aaron Gordon trade, had been surging. They had lost their previous game before the Warriors game last night, and the Warriors were playing really well, but the Nuggets were coming back, and they ended up only losing, I think, by like 9 points. If Murray doesn't get hurt, maybe they come back and win that game. But that's just a massive blow to the Nuggets, because they were looking like real contenders, and the word I saw was he's out indefinitely. Which, if it was a partially torn ACL or like a small tear in his ACL, maybe he'd be able to come back for some point in the playoffs. But even then, I don't see that at this point. So they're going to be trying to win a title without Murray, and I just don't see that happening. After Jokic, he is their most important player, and he has a history at this point of stepping his game up massively in the playoffs. So I just don't see it. I like Monty Morris, but he's a backup point guard. He's an awesome backup point guard. Or maybe a fifth starter if you've got, 3 elite players on the court, 4 really good players on the court that are all better than him, maybe significantly better than him for at least 2 of those guys. But that sucks because the Nuggets have been really fun to watch since acquiring Aaron Gordon. Well, that's not where I wanted my cursor. So that sucks. That means more minutes for Morris, more minutes for PJ Dozier, more minutes for Campazzo. I've forgotten his first name. He came over this year from Europe, one of the top players in Europe. But yeah, I mean this craters their title chances because I really thought they had put themselves up at the top level because Michael Porter Jr. has really been coming around. Aaron Gordon is finally in a role that makes sense for him. And Murray and Jokic's connection, like their two-man game, is among it's one of the best pairings in the league in terms of how they elevate each other. So, just super unfortunate. Mark Cuban, after Luka Doncic has already criticized the NBA's play-in tournament format for this year, Mark Cuban is calling it a mistake. If you're not aware of the play-in tournament, it's not really as much a tournament as it is the 7th and 10th best teams in each conference and the 8th and 9th best teams in each conference will play a game against each other. From what I understand, it's a game against each other to determine who gets the last 2 playoff spots. Which, for in the East, well, I don't know. I mean, those teams are still kind of around the same talent level, but like out West, in a way, it kind of nullifies the work done during the year to get those 7th and 8th spots because it is tough out there right now. So, I don't know. I think it's like there's things I like about it, but there's also things that I kind of hate about it. Timberwolves had to reschedule a game. Let's see what this is. The Minnesota Timberwolves game versus the Brooklyn Nets has been rescheduled for Tuesday afternoon without fans. The rare weekday matinee was postponed following. Oh yeah, they postponed all of the games because of an incident in Minnesota that I'm not going to talk about on my channel. Source, Thomas not in Pell's plans at this time. Wonder if that's Isaiah Thomas. Not signing Isaiah Thomas to a second 10-day contract at this time. That makes sense. He doesn't fit their roster anyway. I don't know if Isaiah Thomas fits anyone's roster at this point. Anybody watching the stream who's not up or has forgotten or doesn't know what I'm talking about, Isaiah Thomas is a 5'9" point guard who maybe it was 4 years ago now was like he had a crazy All-NBA season. I think he finished like 3rd or 4th in MVP voting. Playing for the Boston Celtics had, a crazy outlier year for him. But by the time the playoffs came around, he was playing with some kind of hip injury. And then he kind of elected for a bit not to get surgery. Then he did. He got traded that offseason. The Celtics acquired Kyrie Irving. with him or using him as a trade chip, and he's not been the same at any of the places he's played with since. He's played for Cleveland, he's played in LA, for the Lakers, he's been in Washington. He might have did a stint with the Nuggets. I guess he signed a 10-day contract with the Pelicans, but they have so much guard depth there that I think that's dumb. And younger guards who can grow. He just didn't fit there. And he's over 30 at this point. Like, he can't defend anyone. Period. So he's not like explosively quick anymore. And I think his 3-point accuracy has fallen off. So he doesn't hold value. Also in that Nuggets game last night, the loss to the Warriors, one of the reasons the Nuggets lost is because Stephen Curry went for 53 points. He missed a few shots late after being... Steve Kerr does this weird thing with the rotation for the Warriors where he, I guess, continues to play his team like the Warriors are the old Warriors and not the current Warriors. And he'll play Curry pretty much the entire third quarter, and then he sits him for like the first half of the fourth. I'm sitting here like, well, why not just play him like maybe 8 or 9 minutes of the third? Sit him and then play him like 9 minutes, or bring him in with like 3 minutes into the fourth quarter or something like that. If you want to get him 6 minutes of rest. Like, I get part of the idea, but most teams are playing their best players most of the fourth quarter, especially if they're trying to come back in a game that they think is winnable. So what ends up happening is Steph Curry had like a ton of points. He might have had 50 in the third quarter. I know he had a bunch of points, but there's a point where he was like 14 of 20. And then he ended the game like, I think it was 14 of 24. But Steph was on fire last night. He was 10 of 18 from 3. I think, or was it 14 of 18? He hit some ridiculous amount of his 3-point shots. Like, Curry was just on fire. I don't know how anyone can think that there's a better point guard in the NBA right now, I think, than Steph Curry. Like, it's just... I think this season he's putting anyone who still has questions is just delusional. So yeah, so that's kind of the leading NBA news. Let's see if there's anything else down through here. Oh, and I want to talk real quick about the Kendrick Perkins urges Luka Doncic to stop crying about the play-in tourney. I mean, well, Luka does kind of... If there's one knock on Luka, he does come across a little bit as a whiner at times, because, man, he complains to refs about calls during games. And, like, at some point, I'm like, I get that LeBron's, like, the guy you modeled your game after, but you didn't have to pick that up from him, too. Because, like, if there's one stain on LeBron James, it's that he complains about everything. But at the same time, I'm like, you know, Perkins got to ride a bunch of great players to title appearances, and I believe he did win a championship with the Celtics. And I think he might have been on the end of the bench for that Cavaliers team that won the title over the Warriors with LeBron. But he was carried to titles. I think he should, I think he's got like a massive voice, and he seems like he's people like it, or personally, he seems like a pretty cool dude. But uh, I don't know. Like Perk's right, but at the same time, I'm like, I don't know if Perk's the one to talk. But then again, if I'm complaining about him whining, Perk should be allowed to complain about him whining. So you know what? I agree with Perkins. Maybe Luka should stop whining. Maybe part of it's just because I kind of agree with Luka. I'm a little biased. Oh yeah, I want to talk about Ben Simmons of the Sixers real quick. After this, let's see, 3 all-time greats. Now, for some context, the reason I'm clicking on this, I want to see what they're saying, because a lot of the old heads, or like the older players, hated Steph Curry. They hated those Warriors teams that were so good. They were ruining basketball. Also, during the game last night, Steph Curry passed Wilt Chamberlain for the most points scored all time in Warriors history. Curry is 33. And he's having one of his best seasons. Three. Nowitzki, Miller, and Jerry West. West. The only one I really... Well, I love Nowitzki, but at the same time, it's like... Let's see. Jerry West, 14 season, Los Angeles. Here's number 2 all-time leading scorer. Well, and West is one of the guys who was an instrumental executive in those Warriors teams. His opinion matters. Reggie Miller, I don't care what Reggie Miller has to say, because he's stupid. And maybe some people are like, that's kind of rude. It's like, Reggie Miller is to NBA broadcast, or like NBA television broadcasts, what Phil Simms was to NFL television broadcasts. He is the worst color commentary in basketball, as far as I'm concerned. He's just so annoying. Before I move on to NFL stuff, I do want to talk about Ben Simmons. I know that's Joel Embiid's picture. Just ignore that. Ben Simmons frustrates me to no end, and it's not necessarily because of his lack of a jump shot. Ben Simmons is a physical freak of nature. The guy's 6'10", somewhere around 6'10", 6'11". He's like 240, 245. An incredible athlete. And he's an elite and aggressive defender. If he played with the level of aggression on offense that he does on defense, or 80% of the aggression that he shows on defense when he's on the offensive end, it wouldn't matter that he doesn't have a jump shot. But this guy is so passive sometimes on offense. And it's like, I mean, I don't get it. Like, you think with the way he plays defense that he really, really wants it, but on offense, it's just like, sometimes it's just like, bro, do you care? it just frustrates me. Like in their game last night, they're playing the Mavericks. There is no one on that team except for maybe Dorian Finney-Smith who has any sort of. I mean, Luka has good size. Like, I mean, he's like 6'8", been playing at like 230, 240. Like, Luka's a big dude, but he's nowhere near as athletic as Simmons. And he's not as he's like Ben Simmons is just a better athlete than Doncic. And Doncic is nowhere near the defender Simmons is. Simmons should be able to go at Doncic. Dorian Finney-Smith even, who's around the same size as Doncic, maybe a little bit smaller, but he's the best defender on the Mavericks. Simmons still should be able to go at him. And Simmons, like, it's like he doesn't have that in him. He should be aggressively running pick and rolls they should be running plays where he's being screened by Seth Curry or screened for by Seth Curry and Danny Green and some of their other perimeter players who have the Mavs more vulnerable players on there to Simmons' size, strength, and speed. And they should be attacking mismatches and mashing people down to the basket. And he doesn't. Like, with his athletic traits and abilities, he should be averaging more points per game than he does. And he was playing really aggressively in January and kind of in the lead up to the trade deadline. But, I mean, Simmons just doesn't have it. And I think that's going to be the Sixers' biggest downfall in the playoffs. Alrighty. Ooh, Mel Kiper has a new mock draft. Two-round mock. Let's see. Let's worry about the news. Okay. So I said Cardinals sign, this was a big thing I had in my title. The Arizona Cardinals have signed James Conner. Let us look at this. So, Tempe, Arizona. The Arizona Cardinals added much-needed running back or much-needed depth to the backfield on Tuesday when they agreed to terms on a one-year deal with former Steelers running back James Conner. Conner, 25, will be paired with Chase Edmonds, who is a solid rotational back. Conner's a really good receiver out of the backfield, which is important for Kingsbury's offense. You need running backs who can catch the ball. And Conner's a big, strong back who can catch the ball. Another big part of this, James Saxon is the running backs coach in Arizona. Oh, sorry. He was the article states that he was the Steelers' position coach for the running back position in 2017-18, which were Conner's best seasons. Or at the very least in 2018, he went to the Pro Bowl. He had 973 rushing yards and 12 touchdowns last year, tied for third most in the NFL, while catching 55 passes for 497 yards and a touchdown in 13 games. That's the other thing. If he'd played 14 games, he would have gone over 1,000 yards. If he played 16, he probably would have been over 1,100, maybe even close to 1,200. The Cardinals really needed another running back. That was a really good signing for them. Connor has struggled with injuries, but when you're pairing him with a guy like Chase Edmonds, I still think Arizona should probably think about drafting a running back somewhere, but that kind of falls a little lower on the priority list at this point. Oh, I forgot to mute my mic. I'm sorry. But anyway, so I really like that for the Cardinals, and I like that for Connor. Connor is a really good pass catching back. I think this could be an opportunity for him to resurrect his career somewhat if his body, if he is healthy. So, this is another interesting one. I saw this earlier and I wanted to kind of bring this up on stream. So, the Washington football team has signed hoops to tight end hopeful Samis Reyes. Or Samis Reyes. He exited high school with dreams of playing in the NBA. Now he hopes to be the latest Division I basketball player to become an NFL tight end. He would also become the first Chilean-born player to make a 53-man roster. They signed Reyes, who had been training at IMG Academy in Florida as part of the International Pathway Program on Tuesday. Participants in this program get assigned to a random division, and those teams could then pick one player from a pool of 11 athletes. But after Reyes worked out at the University of Florida Pro Day, or the University of Florida's Pro Day on March 31st, Washington decided to sign him so no one else would get a shot. He is 6'6", 260. That's really good size for a tight end. He ran a 4.65. That's really good for that size. You're moving if you're 260. 31 bench press reps at 225. This guy's kind of a physical monster. But he's never played in a game. So his family moved to Florida from Chile when he was 14. Before his senior year at North Broward Prep High School. Of course, he was in Broward County. He practiced with the football team for 1 week before quitting, telling the Sun-Sentinel that he knew he had 20-plus offers to play basketball. Which, that makes sense. He played for 2 seasons at Tulane, appearing in 32 games, averaging 0.8 points and 1.5 rebounds per game. So there you go, man. You got your college offers, you took a college offer, but you apparently weren't very good. Before that, he played a season at Palm Beach State. So he started a smaller school and eventually got to Tulane junior college. He is 25. He last played at Tulane in 2018. So it's been 2 years. And man, you look at those measurables. This guy would have been this guy is a football coach's dream. He's been working out in Virginia with trainer Justin Kavanaugh. His agent, Tabitha Plummer, said multiple teams wanted to sign Reyes. I mean, this is somewhat this is interesting, but I wonder if out of all these players they've just mentioned, if he has the worst production numbers of anyone who has tried to make this jump. Let's see. But Washington would seem to be a perfect fit for an unconventional or a less conventional route to the NFL or to being a tight end, considering their starting tight end last year and kind of a breakout star last year. Logan Thomas was a quarterback at Virginia Tech and when he was first drafted in the NFL. So, good luck to Reyes. I mean, he's got incredible physical tools and whatnot, and maybe he'll be able to harness his physical traits better playing football, but I mean, 0.8 points and 1.5 rebounds a game in 2 seasons at Tulane. I don't know. Like, guys like Antonio Gates, Tony Gonzalez, Jimmy Graham were like at least average college basketball players. I mean, heck, I want to say Gates was even like first team All MAC when he was at Kent State, if not MAC Player of the Year or something like that. Like, he was really good. So, but anyway. And then there's this. The NFL is expecting teams' operations staff to get vaccinated. So if you're just some, random dude with, or in the front office of an NFL team, basically working a 9 to 5 for an NFL team, oh, you better get vaccinated. Let's see. Oh, that was from yesterday. Oh, this is big news. Julian Edelman announcing his retirement after a 12-year career with the New England Patriots. So, Patriots are should probably definitely be in the market for a receiver in this draft, if not a couple now. He also former Super Bowl MVP. I mean, this announcement was made, I guess, after my show because I didn't see it during my show. Man, well, I guess Edelman will have way more time to sit on Instagram and publicly invite people to dinners to explain to them how terrible people they are. Sorry, that was a little... I'm not going to get into that story. Actually, I might have gotten into that story on the podcast, on the show during week 1, maybe. I can't remember. But I'm not going to revisit it here. Edelman had a great career. Guess he's going to be... let's see. Oh, speaking of Washington tight ends, the guy they signed, Reyes. So they signed him like a day or 2 days after cutting Thaddeus Moss, who is one of their tight ends. Thaddeus Moss, they either picked up undrafted or drafted late in the 6th or 7th round of the draft last year. He is the son of Hall of Fame wide receiver Randy Moss, and he's a national champion with the LSU Tigers. Well, Thaddeus Moss has been signed by the Cincinnati Bengals, so he's rejoining college teammate Joe Burrow. And God willing, they're going to draft Jamar Chase at number 5 in the draft and get that connection back up. Let's see. Here's another one, though. Running back Giovanni Bernard signs a 1-year deal with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Well, there's their receiving back. That's a good signing. If he can stay healthy, Bernard is a really good signing for the Buccaneers. The rich just keep getting richer in that case. Let's go down through here, see what else we got. Well, and here's the story about how 2020 opt-outs are trying to squash doubts ahead of the NFL draft. I mean, you wouldn't be having to squash doubts if you just, chosen to play. Like, unless you were like Micah Parsons or Jamar Chase. And honestly, I'm kind of surprised to see that Russo slid as far as he has after a 15.5 sack season in 2019. But that tape, there's still a lot of very raw, just physical dominance over, college competition that worries teams when they're, or about some players jump to the NFL and how much development they're going to have to go through to get where they want or they need them to be. And you look at Caleb Farley. If he had played this year and played well and then had this back procedure, probably doesn't drop. Or if he does, he doesn't drop potentially into the 20s. And Farley might have been the consensus top corner if he had played this year. Instead, he opts out, and then right before his pro day, he has this back procedure, so he doesn't work out at all. And that was the risk of opting out for a lot of these guys. Chase and Parsons just trained for pro days and look like athletic beasts. So the whole opt-out thing, there are a lot of players who are really hurt. Like Kerry Vincent Jr. of LSU, I've not heard anyone talk about him. And he was a guy who seemed solidly in probably the second round, floor of third round range. And I'd assume, and he's someone that I should have been, or that I've been forgetting about, because he opted out. When I've been talking about teams like drafting in the second, third rounds, I haven't mentioned Kerry Vincent once. And Vincent looks like a potential elite slot corner with elite speed. He was a track star in high school. And I can't remember if he kept running track in college, but he's extremely fast. So, but he opted out of 2020, and it hurt his stock. And I don't know if he worked out at LSU's pro day. So honestly, I need to look into that. But opting out can absolutely hurt, or the opting out stuff. And you look at the offensive tackle class we had this year. The top two guys are opt-outs, Rashawn Slater and Penei Sewell. Slater had multiple years of pretty good tape, although there's some people some evaluators who don't necessarily love his tape. Penei Sewell opted out this year. And there were some people who were calling him a generational tackle prospect. I didn't think it was that far. Like, there were some people who were trying to compare him to Jonathan Ogden, and that was stupid. He's nowhere near as good as Jonathan Ogden was at the same age. Like, Ogden was ridiculous. Ogden was also like 6'8". Sewell, I think, came in under 6'6". Ogden was 6'8". I think he played at like 325, 330, and he was ridiculously agile. He was lighter on his feet than Sewell is. Sewell wouldn't have even been a top, or wouldn't have even been in my top 3 offensive tackles last year. Still would have been a first-round offensive tackle, but and I like Slater at this point better than Sewell. So, but those guys have question marks because of opt-outs. Although Slater's pro day workout, I think elevated him. Sewell's his pro day measurables came back, and they weren't quite as impressive as I think some people were thinking they were going to be. His length is seemed merely average. And that was one of the knocks on on Slater, is that he's not really long, but Sewell didn't seem that much longer, really. So I think it's entirely possible that one or both of them end up falling outside the top 10. Who knows, though? There are teams in that range that definitely could use offensive tackle, and I'm not saying these guys still aren't worthy of top 10 picks. Sewell has great upside. If he had played this year, he may have solidified his status as potentially a generational talent if he showed that he had improved. But that's the thing of not having tape for a year. We have to look at where you were a year ago and speculate on whether you've made any progress or not. And there's also the possibility that maybe not playing for a year, you maybe have regressed. I think that's unlikely, especially for players this young, and if they've been spending this entire time working on technique and training. But that is a possibility. Whereas you get guys like Christian Darrisaw and Tevin Jenkins, who looked great this year and have moved up boards. Darrisaw moving into the first round. Tevin Jenkins proving that he's my favorite offensive lineman in this draft. I loved some Tevin Jenkins. So the opt-out question is very interesting. And there's so many players that didn't opt out and I've seen some stuff that there are some front offices that are dinging people for opting out. That, because, and I get 2020 was crazy, but you look at how many players were fighting to play last year. You look at a guy like Justin Fields, who arguably playing last year hurt his draft stock to a degree. That the Indiana and Northwestern games, or at the very least put some questions in people's minds, or some little, warning signs or some little blips on the radar that people kind of had, but were like, yeah, but I mean, he's so good, or his numbers are so good, And then those radar flashes that people were already seeing, like you see the Indiana game and the Northwestern game, and it's like, oh, maybe those really are. Maybe we should be looking or thinking more about that. He may have hurt himself, but he fought to play last year. Trevor Lawrence had nothing to play for. He played last year. I just think that, or a guy like Najee Harris, there were a lot of people thinking he might opt out, which apparently that was never on his mind. But there were people thinking like, I mean, there were a lot of top prospects that people were like, yeah, maybe they should. And for a lot of people, they're like, well, yeah, these guys absolutely should opt out because then they don't have the opportunity to get hurt this year and hurt their draft stock. But I don't know. Personally, I want guys who really, who they'll run through walls to play football. Like, I want people who love football. And I'm not saying that guys like Jamar Chase, because I would love to have Jamar Chase, don't love the game. But it is one of those things of like, if I have to pick between guys who I think are equal players, one opted out and one didn't, probably picking the guy who didn't opt out. I haven't looked at specifically the college football page in a while. Let's see what we got over here. Anything interesting happened in the college football world? George calls coaching Tennessee State duty of service. That's interesting. I might look into that here in a bit. Georgia high school players ineligible. Wins forfeited. What? I might have to check this article. What is this? Georgia's Valdosta High School players ineligible, wins forfeited. The Georgia High School Association has levied a $7,500 fine against Valdosta High School, ordered the Wildcats to forfeit 7 victories from their 2020 football season, banned the team from playing in the postseason for 2021, and declared a handful of players ineligible for next season after an investigation into whether the team used ineligible players. Oh, my foot's asleep. Executive Director Dr. Robin Hines confirmed. Investigation was the result of comments made by Valdosta High coach Rush Propst on a secretly recorded conversation he had with former Booster Club Executive Director Michael Nub Nelson. He has a nickname? What? In May, in which Propst indicated he needed funny money to help pay for living expenses for players' families who wanted to move. Oh. So, first thing I was thinking was like, oh, so players who are ineligible because of academics, but this is interesting. Propst was placed on administrative leave last month. He couldn't immediately be reached for comments. The Valdosta Board of Education is scheduled to meet Tuesday. And so someone might be thinking, well, why would someone who was a booster for the high school or whatever, or the former executive president or whatever of their booster club or whatever, be like ratting this guy out? Well, I'm going to be honest. If it was my community that was going on, I'd want that stopped. Well, one, because you're moving people from other places to come play at that school. Well, there are kids at that school that want to play. It's kind of bullcrap to, be basically paying expenses for people to come to play football when you got people already there who want to play. How about you make them into something? Let's see. During the secret recording, Propst accused the University of Alabama and University of Georgia of paying high school prospects hundreds of thousands of dollars to play for them. Huh? Source told ESPN that Propst has provided Alabama and Georgia officials with affidavits in which he denied having personal knowledge of recruiting violations committed by either program. I'm just going to be honest. I don't think Alabama has to pay anyone to come play there. I don't think they do. And I don't think Nick Saban would sign off on that. I just don't. I don't believe that for a second. Because Alabama is always a national title contender. They send so many people to the NFL. There is no need to pay anyone because they're going to, if you're good, you're going to get paid anyway. You're going to make millions. It's like, because I've heard people who, there was a high school coach in the area that I grew up in who claimed multiple schools had, or were paying players, da-da-da-da. This guy couldn't have known because none of his players were ever recruited by any of those schools. So which, of course, maybe he knows people. And Valdosta, I think, or this high school, I think, does actually produce players that do go to these colleges, but hundreds of thousands of dollars sounds ridiculous. It's like they absolutely would have been caught by now. Every school where this happens, they get caught. Now that doesn't mean that we know that they get caught either, because the NCAA has a tendency to sweep some things under the rug or punish teams for certain violations, but not everything. But the NCAA's, the people who run the NCAA cannot stand the idea of college athletes getting paid anything, that any money that they could get their hands on is going to the student athletes. They can't stand that idea. And it doesn't matter if you're a blue blood program or not, because everybody's like, well, but it's Alabama. They would never. It's like they took down USC. They've taken down Ohio State. They've taken down Miami. They will take down anyone. It's a dumb argument. It's a stupid argument because we've seen them take down blue blood programs. And it also seems a little bit like projection from Probst. Because what I'm guessing is maybe this guy kind of pushed back on him like, you're paying players? And he probably just said, Alabama and Georgia pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to players. I bet you it's just, or this guy's projecting because it's something that he does. Once again, Probst has provided Alabama and Georgia officials with affidavits in which he denied having personal knowledge of any recruiting violations. Nelson had separate conference calls last week with officials from Alabama, Georgia, and the NCAA enforcement investigators. Valdosta had already been required to forfeit one of its victories from the 2020 season after it declared star quarterback Jake Garcia ineligible. So this is where Jake Garcia is from. Okay. Or this is where he's playing. Jake Garcia is a huge, arguably the biggest quarterback prospect in the country this past year. He moved to Valdosta last summer after California pushed back the start of its football season because of the coronavirus pandemic. Garcia played only one game for the Wildcats before he was ruled ineligible because he and his family hadn't made a bona fide move, and this is where this story gets a little more complex, because California decided that they weren't going to allow kids to go to school and allow things to happen when they should be happening. Jake Garcia here is getting punished because he and his family tried to find a way for him to play a full high school football season at the correct time to where he would have his season finished and he'd be able to enroll early at a college, and be on campus in January. So they go to Georgia, and I'm wondering, I would probably assume that maybe this or Jake and his family didn't get paid, but because they didn't make what is called a bona fide move. What I'm guessing is they didn't buy a house or a home or whatever. Some of this stuff is, and once again, this stuff is to some degree to protect the integrity of high school sports, to protect and for school players to get opportunities where they are actually from to play sports. But in an earlier ESPN story, Randy Garcia, Jake's father, said that he and his wife, Yvonne, legally separated to meet the transfer requirement. So these parents went through a legal process of separating to meet transfer requirements for him. You know what? I don't even care if, what? If this props guy was paying players, yes, victory should be. But my goodness, what? A family did everything they could to jump through hoops so their son could play high school or could play his senior year of high school football somewhere. And he still ends up getting ruled ineligible. Can we just replace everybody who is in charge of every sporting amateur sporting confederation or whatever? The NCAA. We should just abolish it and build something new. But these high school associations, this is... After leaving Valdosta, Garcia transferred to Grayson High School in suburban Atlanta, where he helped lead them to the Class 7A state championship. Garcia, the number 18 player in the ESPN 300, signed with Miami and enrolled at the university in January. It almost seems like potentially the GSHA just wanted him to go to a different school, maybe. Wow. So it wasn't okay for him to play at Valdosta, but it was okay for him to play in suburban Atlanta. At least he was able to play somewhere. In an earlier sworn deposition as part of a lawsuit filed by former Valdosta High coach Alan Rodemaker, Nelson accused Probst, and maybe this is it. Maybe this Probst guy and some other people, maybe it was just the GSHA was out, GHSA was out to get this guy and get Valdosta for good reason, so it's possible Garcia kind of got caught up in that. But Nelson accused Probst of wanting $2,500 per month to pay for rent and other expenses after Garcia and his father moved from California to Valdosta. So, maybe Garcia and his dad were getting getting help. But at the same time, this situation doesn't happen. This situation doesn't happen if California just has a high school football season. You put people in a tough spot where they're trying to make decisions for their kids. Nelson also said during the deposition that Probst was seeking $850 per month to pay expenses for quarterback Amari Jones, who relocated to Valdosta from the Atlanta area. A handful of Wildcats players, including wide receiver Taj Sanders, the number 219 prospect in the 2022 ESPN 300, followed Probst to Valdosta from Colquitt County High in Moultrie, Georgia. So this guy was a coach somewhere else. A handful of Wildcats players... So a handful of players followed him from Colquitt County High. Probst, 63, has been one of the most successful and controversial high school coaches in the country. After winning 5 state championships at Hoover High in Alabama, Probst announced his resignation in October of 2007, effective at the end of the season, after an investigation alleged improprieties in his program and concluded that he had quietly supported a second family in another town. As in, like, he had 2 families? What? Probst, who was married with children at the time, eventually divorced his wife and married the woman with whom he shared his secret life. Okay, so what a piece of crap human being. After leaving Hoover, man, I'm glad I found this article. This is entertaining. After leaving Hoover, Probst won 2 more state championships in 11 seasons at Colquitt County High. In March 2019, he was fired after a school board investigation alleged he committed ethics violations. In an interview with ESPN in September, Probst denied the allegations. The Georgia Professional Standard Commission, which establishes and certifies teaching certificates in the state, has also opened an investigation, sources told ESPN. The commission investigated Probst in 2019 while he was coaching at Colquitt County High and reinstated his certification in March 2020. Well, how about that? Well, there's you a story. High school football, man. It's huge here in Texas, and outside of Texas, it's probably the biggest places for high school football. California, like Southern Californians really love their high school football, but like Alabama and Georgia, that's big ticket in those states, just like it is here in Texas. And Florida's super competitive, but I don't know if they take it as seriously as like Texas, Alabama, and Georgia. But those are probably the 4, most competitive. That's wild. Now, here's some huge news from Heather Dinich. The American Athletic Conference is going to allow players to transfer within league without losing a year of eligibility. That's a big deal because most conferences, it's like guaranteed you're going to have to sit out a year if you're transferring to another school in conference. Because it's like, you don't want to help your rivals. You don't want to help your direct competition. I tell you what, they're trying to make those teams are trying to make themselves more player friendly. I think this is an aggressive move to try and improve the quality of players that'll come into to their programs. The decision, which the league's athletic directors made unanimously effective, is effective immediately. It comes on the heels of similar decisions made recently by the Mid-American Conference and the ACC. So, okay. So the ACC has already done this, and the MAC has already done this. That's huge that the ACC is doing it. Not even touching that story. I can't deal with that today. All right. Well, you know what? Let's go back to the homepage. Let's see what else we had, because before I jump to the draft primer. Oh, that was the next one. Sources: Titans great. George. Okay, yeah. Well, they have two headlines for that. Oh. Number 1, James Madison faces Richmond. CAA says. Okay. All right. So, some other draft news as I get ready to do the draft primer. Kellen Mond seems very solidly in the day 2 discussion. Scouts seem to really like him as a prospect, which I like Kellen Mond as a prospect, and honestly, that's why I have him ranked ahead of Trask as my number 6 quarterback. So, but yeah. See, I'm trying to remember who. Oh yeah, Cincinnati. All right, so let's start the AFC North Draft Primer real quick. Didn't finish this water. Uno momento. Sorry, drinking all this liquid is really helping my throat. So, Cincinnati has... So they have picks in every round. They have a couple 7th rounders. Cincinnati just doesn't deal in draft capital very often, and they don't make like a ton of trades. So, which is a good thing because it means you're not out your own pick. But at the same time, it usually means like you don't have extra picks to like move around the board. So the Bengals at number 5. I mentioned this earlier briefly, but I think they should take, if Jamar Chase is on the board at 5, and I think it is pretty much a guarantee he will be. Cincinnati should run to the podium and take him. He has ready-made chemistry with Burrow. You have Jonah Williams. He's your left tackle. This is a deep tackle class. You just draft a right tackle at 38. That's what you do. And you just roll. But you give... T. Higgins is a really, really good receiver. He is nowhere near as good as Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase is a legit, bona fide, number 1 stud wide receiver. That's what he projects as. That's what he has shown himself to be. He's got elite speed. He is strong. He's well built for a guy, or he and Devontae Smith are the same height. Chase has 25 to 30 pounds on him. Like, this guy is explosive. This guy has every tool in his bag. The only thing he's not is, 6'3", 6'4", 6'5". And that really doesn't matter that much. This guy had a 41.5-inch vert. This guy is explosive. Jamar Chase, as much as there's a lot of me that believes Devontae Smith is the best pure receiver in this draft, but I do think he is athletic. It is hard to look at Jamar Chase's traits and not see him as the number 1 receiver. I've had them 1 and 1A for pretty much this entire process. But the further I get from the season and what just happened and the recency bias begins to fade, I absolutely understand. And the biggest thing here is Chase has ready-made chemistry with Burrow. If you put Chase as your number 1 with Higgins on the other side with Tyler Boyd in the slot, and they have some nice receivers behind them, like as role player receivers, rotational receivers. they have one of the best receiving corps of the NFL from the jump this year. I just think that I personally think that that's what the Bengals should do. There are tons of offensive tackles. Trust yourself to develop them, because you're going to have to develop whoever you draft. None of these guys are finished products entirely. So then you move down to their second pick. And here's the other thing. If the Bengals really wanted to, they don't have they only have their own picks. But if there's someone you really like a tackle you really like, who starts to slide, like at the back end of the first round, or maybe you decide you want to move up to the beginning of the second round and make sure you get the guy you like, you could do that. But I think good tackles are going to be available at 38, like starter tackles. Like Liam Eichenberg, Jalen Mayfield. I keep saying these names, but these are the guys in that range. Liam Eichenberg, Jalen Mayfield, Sam Cosmi, Dylan Radins. These guys, those four guys, at least one of them I would expect to be available at 38. All worthy picks. I'm lower on Sam Cosmi than a lot of people, but there's a lot of people who have him as a first-round guy. He has the traits for it, but I'm really back and forth on him. He really cut down on his penalties last year, but there were other things I didn't like. So I would take the other three guys first, but it depends on who's available and what you're looking, what you want. But those are guys who will be available at 38. Improve your protection for Burrow. Then you move down to 69. Fifth pick of the third round. And now you're looking a little more at need. It's at this point, I would say this is where you would want to target. I think they need to target D-line. They need to add, and probably interior D-line. They could fix so much. It's like they could go interior offensive line. Really, they need to make this season about protecting Burrow. So this might be third and fourth round. Probably should go and draft a guard or a center of some type. But let's say they go D-line. I believe, if I remember correctly, Geno Atkins was a third-round pick. I think Sam Hubbard was a third-round pick. They did just sign Trey Hendrickson, and they have Sam Hubbard, but they really need, they need a guy who's really more of a pure, or a real pure speed kind of edge guy. Patrick Jones II would be a good pick at 69. But if I'm thinking of more their type of guy, Rashad Weaver would be a guy who's kind of bigger. He would give you versatility, like outside-inside versatility. You've got, if Joe Tryon were to slip into or to the early third round, Joe Tryon would just be a great choice. Emerson Smith would be a good, it just depends on the kind of type of player you're wanting on the edge. And if you're wanting a defensive tackle, you've got like a big guy in DJ Reader. This would be a really good spot for like a smaller guy. This guy named, I believe it's Mitchell from Louisiana Tech that Mel Kiper is really high on. He plays about 280, 285, or I think maybe like 285. Could be a really good like complementary option to DJ Reader moving forward. Then round 4, you go maybe the interior of that offensive line. And then rounds 5, 6, 7, you've got 2 picks in round 7. I'd probably draft another safety if I was here for the Bengals. This would be a good spot maybe to take a developmental tight end prospect. And then probably a depth linebacker. They did draft 2 linebackers last year in the middle rounds, but those guys need depth behind them as well. So, but that's what I do as the Bengals. Like, is wide receiver necessarily like a big need for them? No. And this is a deep receiver class, but you have a chance to get your star young franchise quarterback, his top receiver, his Biletnikoff winning receiver from his historic college campaign, who is an elite athlete, an elite talent at the position, is also he's a really good he's a technically sound player at the position on top of the just beastly athleticism. They have ready-made chemistry. You just take him. I think you just take Chase. Having more weapons on the field will help. And it's a deep offensive tackle class where you could get that guy or your right tackle in the second round to pair with Jonah Williams. And then from there, focus on like whichever needs, or you draft best player available strategy, but they've invested so much at corner, I don't think they draft a corner this year. As much as they have historically loved to draft corners, they do have there is a new sheriff in town. In terms of who's running the team or like at coach. There's a new staff, so I don't know how much front office turnover they had during their transition, but I know owner Mike Brown is still the general manager, so we'll see. From there, I'm trying to remember who picks next out of the teams. Well, I know how I'll find out. Baltimore's at 27. That's what I thought. I think they're the last one, or the next to last. Browns are 26. So, yeah, Pittsburgh's the next one because they picked 24. So, Pittsburgh. So, for the Steelers this year, they're rolling with Ben Roethlisberger. They have Dwayne Haskins and Mason Rudolph in the background at quarterback. But they're rolling with Roethlisberger. So, the biggest holes on this roster right now. Running back is a big one. The offensive line, you have multiple spots on the offensive line that need help. You've got to replace. Well, Villanueva is still on the free agent market. It's possible they could. You know what I'm going to do? I should have been doing this before. Let's go. Oh. Boom. See if I have. I saw someone using this. I don't know if I have to pay like anything for it. Nope. So let's check this out. We've got. Let's look at the Steelers depth chart here. So let's move down to. So we're looking at offensive tackle, left guard. That's what I was thinking. No Marquise Pouncey. Man, I definitely think they're going to need to focus at. They're definitely going to need to focus on the offensive line here. Yeah. Sorry, I'm taking a little bit of time here to kind of look through here. Carlos Davis, say Bugs. Their defensive line's super deep. Some people have them needing, like, severely needing pass rush help or, like, depth, really, because Alex Highsmith, they don't expect him to be, like, necessarily as every down as Bud Dupree could be. I don't know if I actually agree with that. I really like Highsmith, so. Oh, I guess Vance Williams is no longer with the team either. That's interesting. And some people are a little concerned with him at corner. I'm not necessarily super concerned with him at corner just yet, because they've done a pretty good job of developing, like, their younger corners over time. But let's see. So 24. A lot of people have them just going with Najee Harris at 24. And I like the fit there. My thing is, though, Anthony McFarland should be a pretty good, like, third down type running back in the NFL. Benny Snell is kind of a power runner, but if he's your lead back, you can do better. But that's not going to matter if your offensive line sucks. And they do a good job of developing their offensive linemen, but I really don't like the idea that I'm going in. I'm not a huge fan of them going in with the two tackles they have starting. And I think at left tackle, or they should be drafting a tackle here. Personally. Or at least an offensive lineman of some sort. Maybe an interior lineman. I've seen a lot of people put Landon Dickerson in this spot. But I am a little bit concerned with his ACL, even though he was turning cartwheels in the background of Mac Jones's pictures trolling him during the Alabama Pro Day. So, because apparently that wasn't like a complete tear or something like that. So, but Roethlisberger's older at this point. He's not as mobile as he used to be. And you need to open lanes for whoever is going to be your running back. So I say at 24. And I think this guy is exactly the kind of player the Steelers love at tackle. I say you take Jalen Mayfield because personally, like, if Tevin Jenkins is on the board, I say you run to the podium with that one. If Christian Darrisaw somehow falls that far, you run with that one. I don't think either of those guys are going to be available. I think they're going to be gone by the time the Steelers get on the clock. So the best tackle available will be, or tackles available will be Jalen Mayfield and Liam Eichenberg. And I think Mayfield has more upside than Eichenberg. So I'm gonna go with Mayfield. He is a long, powerful player who will immediately upgrade your run game, and he has great pass protection potential. He has work to do in terms of his technique and consistency and pass protection, but the Steelers will get that out of him. I trust them to develop him. So I would go with Mayfield at 24 overall. So then at 55 overall, we've got running back is a big need. If Javonte Williams is still on the board, I think that'd be a great pick. If not, you're looking at maybe Trey Sermon out of Ohio State, who profiles as a great lead back. You've got Michael Carter, who's a little more all-around than Sermon, like a little bit better pass catcher. Not quite as powerful, but Carter, and he's smaller, but Carter's a really good back. If Javonte Williams is there, I'd take him. But I feel like he'll be gone by then. Unless, because the way I value the position, as much as I love Najee Harris, and I think he's an elite running back prospect, I'd rather draft other things in the first round. So in this scenario, or the way I'm looking at the board and the way I'm having teams draft, it's like I wouldn't draft a running back in the first round. I wouldn't. Especially now, with the Buccaneers having signed Giovanni, I just don't see the point in drafting a running back in the first round. I don't know if there's any team with... The Steelers probably have the weakest running back group, them and the Dolphins, right now in the NFL. So maybe they could justify taking running backs in the first round with their picks, but I just don't love it. And if teams don't take those running backs in the first round, there's going to be better value on the running back position later. So maybe if Harris and Etienne don't go in the first round, it's more likely that Javonte Williams would be available at 55. But I would say take your running back at 55. Unless there's some crazy run on running backs, like 2 or even 3 go in the first round. Because I have seen a mock draft that had Harris going 18, Etienne going 23, and Javonte Williams going, it was either to the Steelers at 24 or it was to the Bills at 31. The Bills are a team that could also go running back first round, but I don't like it. I don't like the value. The other way you go at 55, don't go running back and instead go and draft another offensive lineman. Draft an interior guy at 55. So this is where you've got Quentin Miners, Wyatt Davis, maybe Creed Humphrey or Landon Dickerson falls this far. Landon Dickerson potentially because of the ACL injury from last year. And most of his seasons in college ended with an injury. So I bet you that's coming through my mic. So 50, what was I saying? So Trey Smith out of Tennessee. And Trey Smith, Pittsburgh's gotten pretty decent luck out of, the last Tennessee offensive lineman they drafted, I think, was Ramon Foster. I know they drafted him. He had a long career there. You draft Trey Smith, you plug him in at left guard where Ramon Foster was a rock for you for a decade, and you just forget about it. Or maybe almost a decade, but and you just forget about it. You put him across from David DeCastro, you've got an awesome guard tandem. An awesome two-way, like run and pass blocking guards. So then round 3, 87. If you don't have a running back yet, and maybe Michael Carter's on the board, maybe this is your spot. Running back, it just depends on who's on the board and when. For me, Kenneth Gainwell be a good one. Maybe Jalen Hawkins of Louisville. But once again, you would be drafting for the second straight year like kind of a smaller back, more of a speedy back like Anthony McFarland. And I don't know. And Hawkins you probably could get on day 3. Like round 4, maybe even round 5. Let's see. Actually, probably round 5. What I would do in round 3 is, depending on who's on the board at corner, I'd probably go corner. I said I like how they develop their guys, but Joe Hayden's still there. Mike Hilton's gone. You cut, what's his name? I'm blanking on. They signed him. I can't remember. I think they signed him to a free agent contract just last year, or maybe it's been 2 years. But he played corner for the Chiefs, and he was really good. But I think they cut him. I don't think he just walked. But you've got the young guy Justin Lane out of Michigan State, who I really liked. I thought he was a great draft pick when they drafted him. He was one of my favorite like sleepers at the cornerback position. Thought he had a ton of upside. Right now he's penciled to start across from Hayden Nat. And then former Tennessee Volunteer Cameron Sutton, who the Steelers drafted, they're starting nickelback still. I would say that corner would be a good one, or a good thing to target at 87. Trey Brown out of Oklahoma would probably be good value in that range. A lot of times I'm mentioning, I keep forgetting his first name. I want to say it's Keith Taylor, but I feel like I'm wrong there. But Taylor out of Washington. Maybe Tyson Campbell falls that far. I don't see it happening, but because I think if he doesn't go in the second round, like the late second, he'll go early third. Tyson Campbell has great physical traits, though. I feel like he'd be a perfect fit for the Steelers. Well, I say perfect. He's got for a guy who's like around or close to 6'3" at corner, he's got really good like flexibility in his hips. Like really good change of direction. I think he's the prototype corner of the future. And if you're playing like particularly like the way the 49ers like that Seahawks style of defense, like he is built perfectly for that. Not that the Steelers do, but they mix up coverages a lot. But I also think Campbell has more man coverage ability than most guys in his mold. So then you've got 2 picks in the 4th round. If you haven't gone running back yet, which so far for me, I'm going to say you just keep, or I would just say like the way the board is falling potentially, like if you haven't gone running back in round 2 or 3, one of your 4th round picks has to be on a running back, or at least a really good starter. Like, I mean, you're getting guys in the 7th round or undrafted that are hitting like regularly these days, like Robinson last year for Jacksonville. But you're getting down to the 4th round. Let's just say you've gone offensive tackle, you've gone interior line, you've gone corner in rounds 1 through 3. This is where one of these picks probably should be on an inside backer or an edge player of some sort. in which case I'm looking at maybe Caleb McGrone, Monty Rice, if he's fallen this far, Pete Werner of Ohio State. And I'm trying to remember if there's this Cal linebacker, and I don't think he was in the draft last year. If he's in the draft this year, I think his name's Evan Weaver. Really good. He'd be a really good pick in rounds 4 or 5, I think. I guess after I really think the Steelers have to come out of this, or really need to try and come out of this draft with 2 starters on the offensive line, unless they just really like some of the guys they already have in house. I think they need to come away with a corner. They need to come away with a running back, and someone who is more dynamic athletically than Snell, but also isn't like a small fry. Because they have like a scat back type guy in McFarland that they drafted last year. I mean, they need a good running back with balance, which might mean they're having to spend a second round pick on a running back, whatever, third round pick. But it's like offensive tackle, an interior lineman, cornerback, and then I would say, and running back, and then I would say they need to add a guy to their edge rush rotation too. So that would probably be a good priority pick somewhere rounds 3 through 5, just like corner. Because I'm thinking if we're just going to put ranges, I think that first round pick needs to be an offensive tackle. I think running back, you can hit rounds 2 through 5. Corner, you want to hit rounds 2 through 4, but really I'm thinking 2 or 3. Into your line, if you're wanting to get a day 1 starter, you want to hit that round 2 or 3. And that's why running back falls for me, because I'm sitting here like, this is the range I want to hit these in. Or I think it's best to hit these spots in. You could even draft another offensive tackle on day 3, because I think there's going to be some good like developmental players who could be useful as swing linemen in that range. So let's see. Let's move on to the Cleveland. We've won a playoff game, Browns. So this is about building on a really, really successful year last year for the Browns. And I like their roster right now. I love what they've done this offseason. The John Johnson signing him away from the Rams was an awesome move. They have now added one of the best safeties in the NFL, one of the most consistent defensive players in the NFL to the back end of their roster. That was one of their biggest weaknesses last year. Now you turn that to a strength. They added Troy Hill, his teammate at corner. Hill's I think he'll be 30 by the time the season starts. They signed him to a 4-year deal. It's really like a 2-year deal. Hill doesn't have as much mileage on his tires as some guys his age do, though. And he's coming off his best season as a pro, which that can be a good thing or a bad thing. This could be an aberration. But he's been solid as a corner over the past 3 years. And they're not paying him a ridiculous amount of money either. I think this was a good signing. So, and you've already got former first round pick Ward at one corner, who he's really good. You've got that corner position locked down. You've got your number one guy. Adding him to a pretty good corner rotation where you're hoping year 2 Greedy Williams will be back from his shoulder injury. He's long, fast, and has a nose. He's one of those corners that just he's around the football. He's a playmaker. You add Hill to that. He can play in the slot. He can play outside. The Browns have pieces all over. And they've got Grant Delpit coming back from injury, who they drafted last year, who missed the whole year because of injury. Delpit to play, who is a big, athletic, long safety, to play alongside Johnson. Those guys can flip roles. This defense has versatility everywhere. It seems like they're going to sign Jadeveon Clowney to be across from Myles Garrett. That still doesn't preclude them from, and they still should draft an edge rusher in this draft. Having depth at that position is really important. I think their offense is set. All this talk about trading Odell Beckham Jr. Don't. I would say don't unless you get at least what you traded for or traded for him or something close. I wouldn't trade him. He offers too much upside. You've got Jarvis Landry. You've got Rashad Higgins, who's a great third receiver. I think is a really good option as a third receiver. You've got Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt at running back. Got Hooper at tight end. I think David Njoku is still there at tight end, and if so, that's a bonus. And they drafted, I think it was, I can't remember if it was Hunter Bryant or Harrison Bryant they drafted last year at tight end. They've got a good offensive line with a great pair of young tackles. Well, I say young. I mean, Conklin's 26 or 27, whatever. Wills is in his second year. I think Conklin's going to his 6th year. They've got their tackles for years to come. They need to focus on the defense. Really beef up that defense early. And I would say at 26 overall, there's a guy who could be available. I'm going to say probably will be available at this pick. But he fits several teams. If they could get Zaven Collins out of Tulsa at 26, I think that would be awesome. He's 6'4", 260. He's got really good agility and is really fluid in coverage for a guy his size. You put him as a strong side backer in their scheme. This guy can rush this guy can play as an edge rusher. This guy can drop into coverage. This guy can match up with tight ends. I believe at his pro day he ran a 4.6. He's got good speed. It's not Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, Micah Parsons, Jamin Davis speed. But Collins is extremely polished. He's really good. He would absolutely upgrade that defense from the jump, from him stepping on the field. If he's available, Jamin Davis would be a good fit for this team too. If, say, Collins is gone, but he's available. Davis is a freak athlete at the linebacker position. And I think he would profile well in their scheme. There's a lot of people, though, who are mocking an edge rusher to him because Clowney hadn't been signed yet. And even if Clowney is signed, I think it still makes sense. A guy, or Gregory Rousseau, who seems to be falling a little bit on boards, Rousseau would be a really good fit here because if Clowney's there, he's not going to be expected to be necessarily the day one starter exactly at the position. He'll be a part of a rotation, and there won't be as much pressure on him. That would probably be good. I love the Russo pick. I've seen Jalen Phillips go here in mocks. That would be a really, really good pick. Some people have floated the idea of them maybe drafting like Christian Barmore and adding interior pass rush with Clowney potentially, or with Clowney signing. Wouldn't necessarily be a bad move, but they've done pretty well with their defensive tackles. And honestly, I'm going to bring up their depth chart real quick. So just because I want to see that position. So let's look here. Defensive ends, you've got Myles Garrett. And they also signed Tack McKinley. So maybe edge is not as big of a thing. And they also drafted Joe Jackson, I think it was last year. So Porter Gustin. Oh, and Porter Gustin's got good upside too. So, I mean, they'd be okay not drafting, him early. And defensive tackle is pretty strong for them. You've got Sheldon Richardson, who's more than solid. Andrew Billings is a great run stuffer, strong guy who also can push the pocket. Jordan Elliott, who they drafted last year, who a lot of people loved his upside. And then you have Malik Jackson, who they've signed. So defensive tackle, they're pretty set. They probably should maybe focus on the offensive line, which they have some young guys that they've drafted over the past few years. You've got Sion Takitaki. You have Anthony Walker, Jacob Phillips, who was a rookie last year, who I really liked. And then behind them, you've got Mac Wilson, who's, okay, solid linebacker, rotation linebacker. Curtis Weaver, who also is kind of like an edge rusher from Boise State, who I really liked. And they've also got Malcolm Smith, although he hadn't been... His name recognition is more than his actual impact on the field. But I would say they could definitely upgrade the linebacker position. And I think Zaven Collins would really do that. Let's see. I'm looking at their backups at safety. Ronnie Harrison out of Alabama. So they have a third safety who's really good. And Javonte Moffett. They've got a lot of safeties actually on their roster right now. Man, I didn't see this over here. Oh, gosh darn it. I want to close this ad so I can look over here. AJ Green, what? Another AJ Green is in the NFL. Man, this is freaking annoying. Okay, so let's see. But yeah, Greedy Williams is penciled to start. You've got Robert Jackson, not 100% sure who he is. MJ Stewart. Yeah. And then they've got Troy Hill as like their nickel. MJ Stewart didn't really pan out for the Bucs, but he's still pretty young. Is there not a way to close this? That's so annoying. Sorry, I'm distracted by the ad. I mean, they have a really good roster. Well, that's their defense. Let's look at their offense. So you got Jarvis Landry, Donovan Peoples-Jones, who made some plays last year. Okay. Every time I look over here, it goes from whatever was on there and turns into an ad. That is... Let's see. So that's one wide receiver spot. Then you've got Odell Beckham Jr. You got Rashad Higgins. Derek Wells. Alexander Hollins. I didn't even mean to do that time. Ryan Switzer all the way down there. Yeah, let's see. Once again, going kind of through their roster. So left tackle, you've got Jedrick Wills, you got Joe Bitonio, one of the best guards in the NFL at left guard. Anthony Fabiano as one of your backup guards. That's actually, not bad. Center, you got J.C. Treader, which is great. Wyatt Teller was awesome last year at guard for them. Wyatt Teller was great last year. And then you've got Jack Conklin. And then you've got Chris Hubbard as a swing tackle for them. I mean, this is a really, really good... This is a really good offensive line. They could draft one at some point, but they don't have to. This is a team that doesn't have to draft an offensive lineman. And you've got Austin Hooper, Stephen Carlson, I'm not sure who he is, and then Jordan Franks. And then I'm pretty sure they drafted a tight end last year. But I guess he didn't make the roster, I guess. Huh. Oh, okay. Sorry, they have 2 tight ends listed. I'm dumb. So Austin Hooper, and there it is, Harrison Bryant. That's who I thought. Harrison Bryant out of FAU. I loved that pick last year. And David Njoku's still on the roster. I would say that after Njoku, maybe Carlson makes it. Maybe Njoku gets cut. Who knows? But after these first 4, these other guys aren't making the roster at tight end. Just letting y'all know. Let's see. And then, of course, I talked about Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt. And then D'Ernest Johnson was actually solid when he got to play last year as their third back. They're really good at running back. And then their 4th guy on their depth chart, John Kelly out of Tennessee. He's more of a special teams guy, but he's good at that. He's a guy that could easily make the roster. And then they have one of the best fullbacks in the league in Andy Janovich. So the Browns can really do a lot of best player available because personally they don't have I still think that out of all their position groups, linebacker's the weakest. Just because they have a bunch of solid, if not at least replacement level. I would say not even replacement. I'd say it's slightly above replacement level linebackers, but if you can have a stud at every position group, that helps you. And that's why I say Zaven Collins or Jamin Davis at 26 would be really, really good. And with them, if they do get the deal done with Clowney, they'll have him and Takk McKinley. Yes, McKinley hasn't necessarily been consistent. I blame that on Atlanta. I blame that on the coaching staff there. I'm going to give him a second chance. And I'm not counting him being in Oakland for a segment of last season as a second chance. Because who knows what John Gruden's doing over there right now. It still doesn't preclude them from drafting an edge rusher, but I also like Joe Jackson and Philip Guston there. And I think they're really good at defensive tackle. So once again, they can just really do the best player available strategy. So I say Zaven Collins at 26. Then you go at 59 in round 2. Right here. And now it's and you can never have too many secondary players. So this might be a good place for a corner. Maybe you're able to get Eric Stokes here. Maybe you double down and you drafted Greedy Williams. Was it last year? Maybe that was it last year or was it in 2019 that Greedy was a rookie? I think it was 2019. So you like those tall on corners? Get yourself Tyson Campbell at 59. A guy who's 6'2", 6'3", and runs in the 4.3s like Greedy Williams. Then at 89, at 91. Here's maybe where you hit up like a developmental edge type player. With, say, I'm trying to think of like who's going to be available around this time. Patrick Jones could go at any point in the third round. You could get yourself a guy with versatility to play inside outside. Rashad Weaver could be available in this range. Out of Pittsburgh, maybe Cam Sample. I've been talking about Emerson Smith in like the late second, early third, but he's a Northern Iowa prospect, smaller school. He might be available at the back end of the third round. Maybe you want to improve your offensive line depth or receiver depth. You could do that here. But yeah, I mean, the Browns really, it's like best player available is going to be their strategy all down the board. Should be. Because this is a really, really good roster. And if they nail this draft, and if they get if the Browns get, at some point my chat went out. And I'm not sure when that was, because I've been looking at this. For me, if I'm a Browns fan, I'm really looking for them to go like best player available. I'm not super worried about who they're drafting in terms of like what position, but it's going to be about value and really upside, like. Because they need to be balancing the idea of, can this person help us right away, and how good can this guy become down the road? I think guys like Zaven Collins and Jamin Davis would be awesome fits there. And if you just really want to just go pass rush intensive, you've got guys should be available there. Who could help. Some other guys that I didn't mention earlier, like Joseph Osai would be really good. He can play some coverage, but he can also play the edge. 20 tackles for loss last year, 5 sacks. And he's a powerful, powerful dude. And I'd be okay with him going 26 overall, depending on like what pass rushers are available and what you're wanting. The best teams draft players with an idea of how they're going to use them, but also with how those guys are best used, like what their skills are. Bad teams take guys and they try to fit them into a mold that they don't. They draft a guy who fits one mold and they try and force them into their mold, and it ends up he doesn't work out. Yes, you can develop skills for guys for sure, but there are some guys that they aren't going to develop those skills, or they don't fit what you want to do, and you're never going to get them to do what you're wanting to do. So I think with the Browns, and it seems like the current front office, Andrew Berry there. It's Andrew, right? But Barry, their head personnel guy, Coach Kevin Stefanski, they know what kind of team they're wanting to build. They know they have an identity, and they need to play into that. They could draft a receiver as well this year. I mean, they've got Donovan Peoples-Jones and Rashad Higgins behind OBJ and Jarvis Landry. But you can never have too many talented receivers. So But I think most of this draft is going to be focused on defense and maybe depth on the offensive line, depending on how they like the guys they've got. So, if I'm a Browns fan, I'd be feeling really hopeful for this year and really positive. And I would say as long as the Browns, which the Browns have been drafting pretty well actually the last few years. And I really trust Barry's eye for talent. If they trust their board and stick to their board and just go best player available, I think the Browns are going to have a really, really good draft this year. And that brings me finally to the Baltimore Ravens. Went up a little too high. So they're picking at 27. They actually have less compensatory picks than normal this year, but that's because they didn't lose like a ton of free agents after the 2019 season. So at 27, I'm looking at their roster, which I kind of have a better feel for their roster than some of the other teams in the division without looking. Man. They could use an improved. Well, they still have Matt Judon. Or no. Matt Judon's gone. My bad. They don't have that guy. Actually, you know what? I am going to pull up because I want to know what their edge rush rotation is. And it's my show. I'll do what I want. Depth chart. I should have been doing this all along. So, let's see. Actually, I'm going to start up top here. I just want to look at their receivers. I kind of like their top 5 receivers, honestly. Man, seeing Kevin Zeitler on that offensive line is really, really, really good. Get Tyree Phillips, Ben Powers, Brad Bosworth, and Ben Bredesen. I kind of like their offensive line. I think they could probably upgrade at center, but Patrick McCarty is a good Twitter follow, so kind of hope he continues to be their starter. Let's see. Josh Oliver. So Oliver's now on the Ravens. That's interesting. Hey, Eli Wolf, Tennessee boy. He's on their roster. That's cool. Bet he doesn't make the final, but you know what? There's hope. I like the running back room for Baltimore. Justice Hill, Gus Edwards backing up J.K. Dobbins, and then Patrick Ricard. But you look at this defensive front for them. Derek Wolfe, Brandon Williams, Calais Campbell. That's just good. Last year's second round pick Justin Matabuke, who I thought was an awesome value selection for them. You got Justin Ellis as a solid backup nose. Bernardrick Washington Jr. Yeah, I like that. Let's see. On the edge, you got Pernell McPhee. You could upgrade on that. Tyus Bowser, who you're hoping, I guess, is finally going to be the guy. You've got Jalen Ferguson, who you're still hoping will develop a little bit. They really need to go edge for sure. That's what I was thinking with this draft. The fact that LJ Fort is their third or even fourth string middle linebacker says a lot about their linebackers, actually. So yeah. Yeah, looking at this, Yeah, looking at this, they're strong at corner, strong at safety, or at least they're solid to good at safety, in my opinion. Geno Stone was one of my favorite value picks in the draft last year. Okay, I'm pretty sure that these are like where guys were drafted, maybe in their draft. Like this is the pick in the round, is what these number / other number is. Because that would kind of make sense. I mean, they're really good at. I think they're really good at corner. Geno Stone's their 5th safety, and Nigel Warrior's their 6th safety, and he can play some linebacker too. Like, they're deep at safety. So for the Ravens, I would say look at 27 overall. Interior line could be a target here. So this would be a spot where one, Orlando Brown has asked to be traded because he sees himself as a left tackle. I'm like, in the NFL these days, like, it doesn't matter which tackle position you play, they're equally valuable. Guys are getting the same money to play right tackle as left tackle, basically, at this point. Like, if you're an elite tackle, you're an elite tackle. So they could target a right tackle and then trade Brown. Who knows? But I think this would be a good spot where you could see like Creed Humphrey or Landon Dickerson go to particularly upgrade the center position. If we're looking at things that the Ravens though really need edge, in my opinion, and Joseph Asai would be, I think, a really strong pick for them on the edge at 27 because he's a strength guy at the position, which is kind of their type. Jalen Phillips can play D-end or outside linebacker, so he'd be a good pick there. And he's my top edge guy. Azeez Ojulari doesn't really fit their style, so I don't think he would go there. He's more of a pure speed kind of guy, and they like guys who are going to play strong. They like kind of bigger edge guys. So they might not go for. They tended for the most part to not go pass rusher in round 1. That's a position they target in rounds 2 through 4, typically. So, looking at their roster, then it might be prudent for them, even though I kind of like their receivers. It just seems like Miles Boykin, this is a make or break year for him, but I don't know if he's even. I thought last year, year 2, like he didn't really show anything, and I think Devin Duvernay is going to be their main slot guy this year. You've got Watkins, you've got Hollywood Brown, and you've also got James Proche, who can also play the slot. Maybe get a big athletic receiver. Terrace Marshall or Rashad Bateman, which Bateman's not as big, but Bateman would bring a different dynamic to the team. But I like Terrace Marshall. I think you put Terrace Marshall on the field with those guys, he'd be great. But then again, you've got Watkins, who's kind of an athlete. You've got Marquise Brown. You got Devin Duvernay. Bateman would be a really good fit because maybe he's not as fast as those guys, but he's a technically sound receiver. He plays physically. He plays so physically, actually, that people were really surprised when he said at his pro day that he actually played pretty much at 190. He didn't know where this idea that he was playing at like 210 or whatever was going around from. He said maybe 195. So, I think Bateman would be a really good fit. He would really upgrade like their intermediate passing game and their fade game on the sidelines. So I think Bateman or Marshall would be really good picks in the first round for them. Then you get to the second round at pick 58. I think this is where they should draft. And some people might see this as a reach. I don't, because I think he's perfect for him. Cam Sample out of Tulane is a big, he's a big, strong edge guy with some agility. I think he would be a great fit. Another fit at 27 is Zaven Collins was there. Zaven would fit on the edge for them. He's 6'4", 260. He's got really good coverage skill. He's not necessarily a pure pass rusher, but he can rush the passer, and he absolutely has the tools to develop. And he had 4.5 sacks last year. So Collins at 27 might not be a bad idea either. But at 58, I like Cam Sample a lot as an edge guy for them. He's like a better version of Jalen Ferguson. And I don't think you could get him at 1. I don't think Sample will be available at 104 in the third round. But maybe he is. Another interesting candidate, maybe Emerson Smith. Like I said, because of a smaller school. And that's the same thing with Sample. Some people are like, well, yeah, but he's from Tulane, so pick 58. I'm like, I really like Cam Sample. Really like Emerson Smith. I think they'd be off the board by 104. But the Ravens could always trade down. They love trading down. They love getting extra picks. And if there's a team that could afford to trade down out of the first round from 27, the Ravens could absolutely do that. Because, like I said, their biggest needs are more I would say along the interior line, maybe offensive tackle if you're going to trade Orlando Brown. But it seems like they're not doing that. You're good. I mean, I think you're good at corner. You're deep at corner. You're good and deep at safety. I like your middle linebackers. I think this is a draft they could draft multiple edge guys. Maybe draft some depth along the defensive line, potentially. Focus on the offensive line. And maybe draft a receiver. And you could do that just anywhere. So, with that being said, I'm going to wrap up the stream. I've gone about 15 minutes longer than I really wanted to. So, I appreciate you guys tuning in today. People watching this on the archive, thank you for listening to the podcast. I think I won't be streaming tomorrow because tomorrow's Wednesday. I'm really busy on Wednesdays, but I will be back Thursday. I'll have my NFC West draft primer and more news and stuff like that. So if you enjoyed the stream, please hit like. If you want more Blind Eye, please hit subscribe and then hit the bell notification next to subscribe. Switch that to all so you never miss a upload or a stream. So with that being said, I hope y'all have a